Welcome to Transition to Middle School. Just a little bit about our speakers tonight. First of all, I'm Diana Cohen. I work at Appleruth. I'm on the leadership team here, but the real reason that I'm here tonight is because I'm a middle school parent. My oldest son is in 6th grade, and at his school, middle school starts in 5th. So we started last year, but 6th grade feels even more like middle school than 6th grade did, than 5th grade did. So I'm definitely in the thick of it and very excited to talk to our experts. We have Dr. Rivner from Atlanta Jewish Academy, who is here tonight, and she happens to be the principal of the middle school there. So I know her in my personal capacity, as well as having her here tonight in our professional capacity. And I always like when giving bios, obviously we shared the bios of our speakers in the materials for tonight, but I always think it's nice to share a personal note. And so Dr. Rivner, in addition to having a PhD in instructional technology and being the instructional leader at the middle school and having a degree in middle school education and having lots of experience in the classroom and as an administrator, I will say my personal experience with her is that when my son started middle school, I was just dreading it. I was like, middle school stank when I was a kid. I'm not excited to be in this phase with my kids. And I will say she runs a great middle school, and there are happy teachers and happy kids in that middle school. So we are very excited for her feedback and ideas tonight. And our other expert speaker tonight is Kristen Pariseau, or who we call KP, fondly around the office. Her most recent work in education has been here at Appleruth as a tutor. But KP has also taught at all grade levels, I think elementary through high school, and most recently worked at the Lovett School in the Learning Center there, I believe, as a tutor with middle schoolers. And also just on a personal note about KP, I mentioned she's a tutor for us. And we actually just, when families are really happy, they send in these little notes that get sent around to the whole team. And so we actually happened to get a really exciting note from a family about KP today, just saying that when they signed their child up for tutoring, their child did not want to tutor and was not excited about it. And that she really sort of won them over and made the difference for their child in terms of like enjoying learning. And so it's always great to hear that kind of thing. So similarly, Kristen, if you have any brilliant ideas about how to get these middle school kids to love learning, we are going to be all ears tonight. And so we're going to dive into the questions, but again, just a second about Appleruth. Those of you here tonight may be a little bit familiar with us, but just kind of taking a step back for a minute about like why we really do what we do here. And I think it has to do with that email that went around today about KP, is everybody here is excited about changing the way that kids think about their ability to learn and how they think about learning. And we all know like what it's like to have a self-limiting belief about yourself or your abilities. And when you see that in a kid, you can see how much it can stop them from trying new things or from challenging themselves. And so everything that we do at Appleruth is really around wanting to help kids think about themselves in different ways and think about their abilities in different ways so that they can grow. The way that we bring that into the world are through 3 primary areas. We do academic tutoring, we do test prep, and we do executive function coaching. And enough about us, let's jump in with our experts. So the first question that I wanted to kick off with both of you is just to kind of step back and look at the big picture about middle school, because I can say as a middle school parent, it's very easy to kind of get sucked into the details and the day-to-day, but what would be your advice to parents about like, what are we trying to accomplish in middle school? Like, what's the goal? By the time a kid finishes 8th grade, what does success look like? And maybe Dr. Rivner, we'll start with you, and then KP, I'd like to hear what you think as well.
Sure. I think we want students to learn how to learn, and we want them to kind of understand themselves as an academic, because that's what they're going to be doing for the next 4 years after high school and beyond. And the student that they come in as is not the student that they leave middle school as, in so many different ways, physically, mentally, socially. They're changing completely. They're going from, a kid to a young adult. And so really the focus, I think, during the middle school year should be on learning how to learn, and learning who you are as an academic. And that means being okay with failure and like understanding that failure is part of the process. Middle school is a very safe place to fail, and to practice failing, because the more we fail, the more we can continue to grow. And I think just really figuring out who you are as a student is the purpose of middle school. One of the big purposes of middle school.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Dr. Ribner said, and I will add in there like the socialization aspect of it, because I think that's when we really learn to socialize with our peers, and also appropriate behavior to teachers, right? Because in elementary school, like I taught elementary school for a few years, and what made me stop was I was like, why are the kids always touching me? And why are they asking me so many questions? And my co-teacher, when I was student teaching, was like, that's just how 8-year-olds act. And I was like, that is mortifying. So after a couple of years, I moved up and taught middle school. And then, kids have to learn, like when you get to middle school, it's not necessarily appropriate to come up and hug your teacher as much. Like maybe kind of one arm around and pat it, because, you get into like the whole what's appropriate and what's not. So, I'll add into like the socialization and teaching kids to advocate for themselves, which is a huge thing, because I would love nothing more than ninth graders coming to me and being like, oh yeah, let me just shoot my teacher an email about that. Because there's some ninth graders that I have to say, hey, you need to email your teacher because you were absent and you need to schedule a time to make up that test. And there's other students who are like, yeah, I already emailed her, I'm going in tomorrow morning. So I think that's what really needs to happen in middle school too, is teaching kids those advocating skills. And instead of being the little kid who like relies on their parents for everything, they grow into a young adult by the time they leave us, and they start to like plan things on their own. They can like get out their agenda, know they have a test next week, and they should start studying for it today, because a sixth grader does not know that at all. So socialization, organization, and self-advocacy, I'd add on.
So if you were gonna like rewind that to the beginning, whether, a child is starting middle school in 5th grade or 6th grade, whatever year it is in their particular school, and ideally, what is like a good set of like baseline starting skills for kids to have when they're starting out middle school? And, I think as parents, we all get concerned really quickly if we're worried that our kid doesn't have. So what's the difference between, I'd say, like normal, like adjusting to middle school bumps in the road versus like something where a parent might say like, hey, maybe my kid does need extra support to adjust to middle school?
Go ahead.
I think that the executive functioning piece, like being able to organize your ideas or to put things in a planner or long-term projects, that's really something that jumps up in middle school, that ability to start chunking a project that might be a week-long project, and saying, okay, tonight I'm going to do 20 minutes, and tomorrow night, you know what, I have rock climbing, so I can't really do it on Tuesdays, but Wednesdays I can work for 30 minutes. That's something that with assistance, I think a student should be able to get to in 6th, 7th grade. I think for a 5th grader, that's really hard for them to innately have that ability. If they have that, that's amazing. They are a super child, and they should be teaching the class on executive function. But that's really a place where we see kids, all kids really come into middle school that they need some assistance. And if that continues to be a struggle throughout 7th and 8th grade, that's where I think that there might be, you might want additional outside assistance, especially, it depends on the school also. There might be some supports that can happen inside the school, and you might want to look into like outside supports for executive function also.
I would add on that one thing that really helps, and I do this with my high schoolers, even my 9th graders, especially. Every school now has some kind of online system, especially after COVID. Now they all have like a plan for in case we have COVID again, at any time, who knows? So they all have these like robust online systems now where like work is kept and assignments are. I'd say like 95% of schools have that now. So one thing I would do is sit down with my 6th grader and navigate those pages, because I'll tell you, as a tutor, when I'm tutoring kids, and like I was tutoring a girl earlier here in like algebra 2, and I've tutored 2 girls that are in the same class together, and I've tutored them since like before I worked at Apple Ruth, and they're in high school now. So one of them like pulled up the page for me and showed me exactly where it was, and then I took a screenshot and then was writing on it on my iPad. The other girl who I saw yesterday, she's like, I don't think there's an online version, but they have the same teacher. So I think that's one thing that's really helpful for 6th graders is like, go in, like at Lovett, all the students have daily agendas. And so I went in with a kid that I'm working on executive functioning with, because he misses a lot of days of school for a sickness. And I went in and I was like, okay, now show me this teacher's page. Okay, now click on the daily agenda. Okay, now tell me, what did you miss last week? Okay, now go to this page, click on it. But you could still do that with the sixth grader and be like, okay, show me what you did last week, and they can go through it. And then you too will know as a parent what's on there, what's not on there. Do they put assignments on there? Do they not? Because every school differs exactly what's on there. But having your kids show you and do a walkthrough, and it can be more like, oh, we're just hanging out and you're showing me school. And then you'll get a better idea like where stuff is and what's on there. So I think that'd be helpful.
I feel like one of the things I hear you guys saying is that one of the biggest, and I certainly have experienced this firsthand as a parent, one of the hardest things about the transition to middle school is like these organizational executive function type of skills.
Mhm.
Are there other things like aside from that, or in addition to that, that you feel like are important to a successful transition to middle school, or that are important steps up in skills that students will go through in those early years of middle school?
Absolutely. I'm thinking of social and emotional pieces. I think it is so hard for students who are transitioning from childhood to young adulthood. Right now, there's a lot of digital media, social media. So much of their friendship is online. I think that it makes being a teenager and a preteen really challenging. It's really hard, and it's something that we didn't grow up with, and so it's hard for us to also even like understand or empathize. And also in middle school, you have some families that don't have or that are choosing not to give their children devices yet. And there are some families that the kid has had a device since fourth grade. So there's also that digital world that you're navigating as a parent and helping your child navigate that as well. And I think middle school is a place where you see not every child is going to grow up in the same way. Their brains are not developing at the same speed. And so you might have, even their bodies are not developing at the same. So it's a very hard time for these kids, socially and emotionally. And I think that the digital piece is really, it's a serious challenge that we have to help our kids navigate.
I would add in like one suggestion that I really liked. We did this similar webinar a couple weeks ago, week and a half ago, with a high school principal. And one thing that he said, he always suggested to parents to like have like family dinner and sit down time on Sunday nights and Wednesday nights. And then he was like, Sunday night, sit down and talk about what's coming up that week and, blah, blah, blah. And then check in on Wednesday. How did Monday through Wednesday go? What's coming up Thursday and Friday? And so having like a set, even if your family has like crazy schedule, having like one weekend day and one weekday where you check in. And I feel like by the time they get to high school, they're probably not going to talk to you about social media, but I feel like maybe middle schoolers would. And, like, oh, I heard about this new app. Cause like half the time, like when Snapchat came out, I was like, what is this? And what are they sending? And I have no idea. Like probably there's pictures of me going on in Snapchat. And I'm like, what, when are they taking these? But, being like talking to your kid, oh, I heard there's this new app, Snapchat. And like, probably by the 8th grade, they won't talk to you about that, but like 5th and 6th grade, like, and then you can sort of get an ear into of like what they know and don't know, because they might know things that you don't think they know. So I think those Sunday meetings could be academic related, also socially related. I would worry if you're asking like, oh, like, have you made a lot of friends? And they're like a few. And if they're kind of like vague and you're not hearing like specific names of kids, especially if they're going to a new school or something. In the other webinar, I was telling them about how my mom in 9th grade, like signed me up for the pep club because I hadn't made any friends. And I was just like transitioning between friend groups, and my mom like made me go work at the football game. So not saying to do that, but try to find out what your kid is interested in and getting them to join some clubs. I mean, there's like robotics, the AV club, like doesn't have to be math club, Chinese club, whatever. Find out what they like, find out what the clubs are. There's usually some kind of club fair. And make sure if you have that kid that's like a little quieter and it's hard for them and there's a bunch of schools dumped into one, really listen that you're hearing like specific friend names, they're going to friends' houses, they're talking to friends. And that can like help you like sort of stay connected with them and make sure they're okay socially as well. So
It's funny that you mentioned just I mean, that's one of the things as a middle school parent that's new and exciting and also challenging, I would say is, I think another big thing that happens is all of a sudden there's like things in addition to just go to school and come home. There's a million opportunities. The play, the sports, the clubs, the student government, and it's all fantastic. And it seems some kids, I think, make a smooth transition into adopting those things, and other kids have a harder time knowing what they like or feeling comfortable. And I think as a parent, it's hard to find that balance of like, how much do I push so that they get out there and try stuff, or how much do I just kind of let them be a kid? And I don't know. I mean, you guys have probably seen it run the gamut, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts about a happy medium or how to like help kids use these years to explore different things.
Really, the school day is a very long day. If you're going from 8 to 3:30, like it is a long day. And then if you tack in traffic and getting home and then dinner and bath, like there's not too much time outside of the hours of the day. I wish we could add more hours, but for some kids, school is enough. Like school is enough stimulant, and that's okay. And I think that the way that school days are kind of packed now, that you do have the robotics and you do have the tech pieces in school. And I think that it's okay if your child doesn't want to be on soccer, if your child doesn't want to, do these other pieces. I don't think that pushing necessarily will make them any different, will change their trajectory. So I feel like if a child wants to, I feel like that's a safe space. But especially now when there's so much coming at them that's new, and their bodies and their minds, and they're figuring out who they are, they'll find what they want to do. And high school is also another great place to explore those options. The day looks different in high school also.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice and a really important reminder, to just remember that like school can often be enough or even more than enough, right? Especially with kids having so much going on in their life. I'll also just say it's funny how you mentioned KP, and in the younger ages, they might say things. I will say that as a parent, sometimes when I find out the most things is when I'm driving a few kids around in my car and they forget that I'm there. And here I am like in traffic, just trying to hold real still. So they still forget that I'm there while I hear about every crush and all the drama that's happening. And like all of a sudden it all comes out. So, there are ways to find out what's going on in their social lives, even if they don't tell you directly. But I would bet by the time they're in 8th grade, they're too smart for that. And
Drive them around.
they do know that you're there in the car and they don't spill the beans anymore. So,
Right.
So we talked a little bit about like the organizational piece, there's the social emotional component, so much going on with them changing. And, if a kid is struggling in some way, it can be hard to know like what's going on, I think. And so especially like, how do you tell, I guess, if a student is it an academic struggle? Like, are they actually having a hard time with their, whatever the subject is, whether it's math or something in language arts, or is it more of like they're having a hard time keeping track of everything, or maybe they're just having a hard time, with the social dynamics of middle school? Like, how do you, I guess, diagnose is a strong word, but how would you advise parents to try to start to unpack that and understand, what's going on with their kids or where their kids might need extra help?
I mean, one thing, because I work with kids across the gamut, like I work with a lot of kids that have learning differences, but sometimes their learning differences just like they need executive functioning help. But one thing I would say, like when we meet as teachers, when I was like in the classroom and kids' names get brought up, one thing you want to look at is it across the board, right? And even if it's across the board, it still could be like organizational. But like sometimes I'd bring up a kid who was just like a disaster in math class, and the English and social studies teacher would be like, they're great in my class. And so then I was like, okay, it's something about math. Like it still could be like an anxiety thing. It still could be a social thing. But I think first getting to the bottom of like, is it across the board, or is it only like in specific classes that is the problem? I'd also like reach out to the teachers. I was saying like self-advocacy, but as 6th graders, we're not there yet. And also they might not even know that they're struggling. So, just reaching out and sending an email, like, I've been noticing this, like, can you let me know? Because you're not sitting next to the kid and you need to find out, like, are they struggling to do the classwork, or are they just forgetting to bring the homework home and work on it? So I think communicating, keeping communication lines. I always appreciated parents who were like on the front end instead of like when the grades come out and then they're like, why is my kid failing? And it's like, dude, they haven't been bringing any work in. I've been sending notes. So I think communicating with the teachers early, finding out if it's across the board, that's kind of what I'd start with. And then if you want to add to that.
No, I think the parent communication is key. I think it's also I think it's important to remember that kids will, if they can, and sometimes other things get in the way. And when a kid isn't feeling good socially or emotionally, like sometimes that also impacts the academics. And so just having that good, clear communication with the teacher is the best place to start. And then once you have that, then you can start kind of pushing away the other layers and figuring out like, what is the root of this? Is it because, there was a big breakup in the 6th grade and now all the friend groups are all mixed up and that your kid can only think of that? Or is it really that they don't understand how to, transfer decimals to fractions? So like we've got to look at the whole child and figure out the whole picture. But keeping that communication clear with that teacher is the beginning of all of it.
Oh, sorry.
Another thing I wanted to add in was like a big thing to look for if your kids change schools. Like for example, like 6th grade is a big time to come into private school. So I work with a lot of incoming 6th graders over the summer because if you're like the whole time you're in like one county of schools or like one set of private schools, it's going to be a lot more streamlined, but especially math and English, because it's like different grammar. Some schools like don't even teach grammar in elementary school and some are very grammar heavy. And so I will watch out for things like grammar, math. Like I had a kid last year and they were doing like greatest common factor and least common multiple. And it turned out that he didn't know how to long divide. So when I was like, well, why don't you just check if like 3 goes into 320? And I mean, I was trying to teach him the rules, like add the digits, but I first was like, well, what about long dividing? You could long divide to check if 3 goes into it. And he just was like, I don't know how to do that. So I started getting to the bottom of like, it wasn't necessarily that he didn't understand how to do factors and multiples. It was that he had holes in from his last school. Like he never really learned how to long divide. And I guess the teacher just sort of went by it. So that's another thing, especially if your kids switched, if you moved or they went from public school to private school or vice versa, that's when I would really look out for that like entry level. They could struggle because they're missing skills and like, it's mostly like writing, grammar, and math are the 3 areas I see it the most. So.
Right. And just to add on to that, Kristen, like social studies and science, they're going to get that content again in high school. And so really it is that the language arts and the math, like making sure that those skills. Yeah, for sure.
Hearing you both talk about, how you kind of pick apart, like what might be some of the things that could get in the way. And it sounds like this like communication with the teachers is such a linchpin. And I'm curious for your perspective on how to do that well as a parent. If you were to be coaching a parent behind the scenes on how to communicate well with teachers in middle school, what would you advise? Because from a parent perspective, you go from elementary school where it's like there's a teacher or maybe 2, right? And so you've got like, it's very clear who your point of communication is. And then in middle school, they might have 7 or 8 teachers and you're never quite sure. Like, what would you, I guess, advise for parents in establishing good lines of communication or who their point of contact should be? Dr. Ribner, you want to maybe start?
Yeah, it's a great question because there are so many teachers. Thinking about those subject areas where you might see a struggle or you might see a challenge for your student is probably the best place to start. And coming at it as a partner, I think is the key here. Is that the teachers want your child to succeed. You want what's best for your child. And I think that the partnership language goes a very long way. I think sometimes it's easy for a parent to like jump to that place where like my child should be getting X, Y, and Z, like I'm a paying customer or I'm a taxpayer. And it already starts that relationship kind of at a rocky start when really everybody's on the same team. We all want your child to succeed. And I think that the partnership language can go a long way.
Yeah, and I'd say like, I don't know, at Lovett where I worked, the students had advisors. And if you are at a school where they have a homeroom teacher and advisor, like that's often a good place to start, especially if it's one of these across the board, like you're noticing if you have like an online parent grade book and you're seeing your kid has all these zeros and it's in multiple classes, the homeroom teacher is a good place to start. Different schools, like I've taught at a school where literally I barely knew the kids' names and I just took attendance and that's all I did. So if someone would have emailed me, I would have been like, I don't know anything about your kid. But when I worked at Lovett, like those were my babies. Like I was assigned like 14 kids and I was in charge of like making sure they had what they needed. And if like something was happening with a teacher, like that was part of me to like help them through that. So if you're at a school like that, the advisor is a great person to start with. I will also like talk to the teachers sooner than later, because there's nothing worse than like, by the time you reach out to the teacher, you're already upset. And it's like, they've already failed a test. And then you're so mad. And then maybe you're even CCing the principal. And as a teacher, when I get blindsided like that, and I'm like, what do you mean Johnny never understood any of this, was so confused in class. And now you're CCing my boss and I didn't know any of that. Especially when you're in like a big public school, you know, I've taught 160 kids a day before. And sometimes I might not notice that Johnny's in the back corner, not saying anything, like, you know, so just reach out sooner than later. If you notice for a couple nights in a row, your kid's really struggling with their homework. They don't understand how to write the lab report. They're not sure how to write that introductory paragraph. You know, reach out and say, hey, my kid was really struggling with this. They were confused. Like, are there some resources that I can use to help them? Instead of like, they learn nothing, fail the test, like now what? You know, so reach out early.
And just to add to that, like your child is hearing you talk about the school and talk about the teachers, and that is their inner dialogue when they see those teachers at school. And so the more you are talking about how the teachers are really working hard and they want what's best for you, like your child hears that too. And that's what's going on in their brain when they come to school. The flip side is when you're, you know, the conversation at home is the teacher, I can't believe the teacher did this and that. And then the child comes to school and is hearing that in their head also. So just when you're at home, your kids are always listening, always.
It's so true, right? It holds us all to a higher standard having kids at home because they are always listening. And I think the points about, you know, being proactive and not letting a problem fester, and then also taking this like, you know, partnership approach is so valuable. I have found also like with my own kids, you know, if they're nervous about something or worried about like, oh, I didn't finish this, what is the teacher going to say? And just like reassuring them that like, you know, this teacher wants to see you succeed, right? And you know, if you go in and tell them like, you know, you didn't get to finish the homework last night because of X, Y, and Z, but you want to finish it, they're going to be thrilled, right? Like that, you know, just trying to like reassure them that like this teacher is a human being who wants to see you succeed. They're not like, you know, I mean, we remember what we felt like when we were kids too. We were scared to like mess up or do something, and we didn't have this like adult perspective on what our teachers thought. And so I think helping their little 6th grade, 7th grade minds see that as much as possible is helpful. I'm curious, you guys both mentioned a bit about homework and things, you know, maybe if they're having a hard time getting through the homework, that kind of thing. And it ties in, I think, to the executive function skills that we're trying to develop in our kids in these grades. Is there anything you would recommend to parents to kind of like what to do if their kids are having a hard time getting the assignments done or kind of, you know, melting down, getting the work done at home? Like any skills or strategies that parents can employ to just kind of make those nights go a little better?
I mean, one thing I'd say that is so important is having some sort of an agenda. So I know some schools, like at the school I worked at, they were giving the kids the option of using like an online agenda versus like a paper agenda. So it depends on the school, what they use, like, and as long as it's like, if they have an online agenda, I would just like have them like the same thing with the pages, have them log on, show you what it looks like. Because in my experience, most times when kids aren't getting their work done, it's because they're just not writing it down. You know, those are the same kids that show up and they're like, I had a test today and I didn't even know it. I was like, I'm sure your teacher told you, but organization, having them write it down, and then even having like literally like crossing it off when it's done. And then when they're at their locker, standing at their locker, And then they look at what they have homework for that day as they're packing up their bag. Like, I have my math homework. Okay, math homework goes in there. Okay. I have some English homework, put that in my backpack. So having them get in the habit of like using their agenda to pack up their book bag and then sitting down, take it out, check it off, put it back in there, take it out, check it off, put it back in there. I mean, we all have to have systems in place for things to go the way they need to go. Like when I pack, I have a checklist because I forgot my brush so many times or toothbrush or something. Eventually I made a spreadsheet and I just print it out, check it all off, and then I have everything I need. So, but sixth graders don't know that. They have to learn that. They're used to going to school and you give them their sweatshirt and their water bottle, and then they're mostly in the same place all day. And then they leave that room and they come back home and like, that's it. And they don't get that much homework. So organization.
Right. And I think that one of the things, like you said earlier, KP, that came out of COVID was the LMS systems, like the learning management systems, like Google Classroom or Moodle, and having all of that access at home, which is helpful for students. I think that the paper planner is absolutely, like, it's good for students to write that down, but also if that's just not what they are, where they are right then, the LMS is also really helpful too, because it shows you like did not turn in or is due tomorrow. And it especially if you use Google Classroom, that's what I'm most familiar with. It syncs with your Google Calendar so you can see when there are due dates, and having the student be able to like look at that and play with that calendar. Because right now I only use a digital calendar, and I don't know what our kids are going to use in 10 years. So giving them all those tools is helpful as well.
I want to go back to something actually that came up closer to the beginning. I think Dr. Rivner, we were just kind of introducing like what are kids going to learn during these years, and you talked about like middle school being a safe place to fail and being comfortable with making mistakes, and that's how we learn. And that obviously ties into the idea of a growth mindset. And so I'm just curious to hear thoughts from both of you about, things that can happen at school or that you would recommend happening at school, but also at home that parents can do to help develop that growth mindset, that ability to try, mess up, make mistakes, take risks, and learn.
I just want to share a few anecdotes. Like I've been working in middle school long enough to see students that, maybe they needed some learning support, or they had some challenges in middle school. And I've seen them go on to honors programs in colleges and, Ivy League. And so I just cannot hit this home enough that the student that you are in middle school is not the student that you are forever. And it really goes down to that growth mindset and having, a family and a school that's supportive, that really looks at each child individually and helps them be their best person. Because it really does not, your middle school years do not define who you are. It's just, and it really is a good place to fail. It's a great place to get that B or that C or a D, because that teaches you what that is, what that feels like. And, you can decide, oh, I did this and I got a B. If we're going to tie ourselves to grades, we don't want to tie our worth to grades, but if you want to, a B is not who you are. And so, that as you move on, like, oh, if I do my homework and I write in my agenda book, then maybe that B will be an A. And so I think that students figure that out in middle school, especially when they're surrounded by people who can help them see that this is a learning process. It's not who you are forever. It is what's happening right now.
Well, I also think like when kids do fail, if they are allowed to like bring their tests home and you can walk through with them and say like, wow, look at number one, like, look at how like math is my jam. Okay. So my examples are usually math because I love math. So, and that was what I taught most of the time. So, like, oh, look at number one, look at how well you showed your work there. And you like on this order of operations, that was such a hard problem, but you went through and showed all your steps and like, look, you got that one right. It's like, maybe they failed the test, but let's go through it first. And let's look at like some problems they did get right and some areas of their strengths and talk about that. And then go back and be like, so how do you think you could have done this problem differently? Like, what changes could you have made to this? So instead of like, did you study? Why did you fail this test? Just like learn from the mistakes you made. And I mean, a lot of schools make kids do corrections, but even if they don't, I would probably have my kids like, oh, let's sit down with a whiteboard and let's try to like, if they were my own personal kids, like, let's try to redo this problem, you know, like, how do you think you would have approached it differently? And also that's another big difference in middle school. A lot of schools have midterms and finals. And so, you know, in 5th grade, if you fail a math test, like, who cares in your mind that you'll never have to see it again, even though it just keeps coming up. Now that test you didn't do well on, like, you're going to have to know it again for a benchmark, a midterm, a final. Like, there's always some kind of middle school test, you know, and like this standardized test if you go to public school. So just taking the time to learn from mistakes, and instead of just looking at the grade and saying, great, you got an A, if you can actually see the paper and be like, wow, look how well you showed your work on all of this. And like, you circled all your answers. Like, I see why you got an A, because you really like did this specific thing, or like they got an A on a paper. Read through the paper and be like, wow, like you use MLA formatting perfectly in there. Look at how you were using all these adjectives. And instead of just saying, great job, you got an A, like give them specific feedback on what they did well. And when they didn't do well, give them specific feedback on the parts that went well, and then have them come up with solutions on how to improve. But because they're 6th graders, you might have to suggest like, what are some ways we could better plan for the test next time, you know?
Yeah, I love this point about, you know, the student that you are in middle school is not the student that you are forever. Because first of all, kids don't have that long-term perspective. And so if we can try to model that for them as parents, that can have a huge impact. And I definitely notice as a middle school parent, this new awareness of my child and his peers of like, you know, placement and things that start to happen in middle school. And they're just more socially aware. Like lots of things were over their head until now. And yeah, you don't want any of that to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so it just is so important, I think, to really try to reinforce that with kids. And I do love the idea, KP, of whether it's an A or a C, it's sort of kind of beside the point. It's like, either way, what are we learning from this? It's all learning, right? So what do we learn from what went well, and what do we learn from what we can do better? And just kind of moving forward based on that, I think is really, really powerful for students. I'm curious for the two of you, like if there's one thing, I guess, just one thing that you wish middle school parents could know, right? Like you both deal with lots of parents in different ways. Like if there's one take home message that you would want parents to have from tonight, what would it be?
I mean, I would just remember that your kid is most likely has good intentions and is trying to do their best, because middle schoolers can be kind of awful, right? They're probably going to tell you they hate you at some point during middle school, because I told my mom that, and most kids do. You know, some days my tutoring kids slink in there and they sit like this and they straight up tell me they don't want to do any work today. But like, just remember that most of them really are trying their hardest, and they really do want to do well. So whenever you're annoyed at them about whatever it is they didn't bring their homework home, didn't clean their room, whatever, just keep in mind that they really are trying their best. There's like so much going on with hormones and friends and now social media. Try to come at it from a place of like partnership, like Dr. Ribner said, and problem solving. Like if we could just go at everything with partnership and problem solving, and like, I know for me, if I'm angry, I got to step away. And if my kid, I don't have kids, but if my nieces do something that annoys me, I'm like, we're going to talk about this, but like, meet me back downstairs in 30 minutes. Cause right now I can't talk about this. And then come at it and be like, all right, well, you know, what choices did you make, and what better choices can we make next time? And just always make it about partnership and problem solving. And I think you'll like get a lot further.
Yeah, I think I'm going to throw in a strategy in there that works so well with middle schoolers as time and space. Giving students time and space, giving yourself as someone who deals with them also that time and space because you never want to react. You want to think before, you know, you engage, and it gives them time also to think before they engage back. And I think that time and space little nugget, it works in so many different situations, whether it's academic or social or behavioral. at home, at school, just taking that beat and giving yourself a moment to take a breath and giving them a moment to take a breath instead of, jumping in. And that's going to help you with KP's problem solving and partnership.
I really do love the idea of time and space and reminding yourself that they do mean well, because KP, no one in my house has ever said a mean word to me or told me that they hate me. So I don't know what you're talking about, but maybe this is something that other parents experience. So it's an important reminder for parents out there.
At some point it might happen. I don't know.
So, yeah, and I also have teenage nieces and nephews, so I know all about it. But I think this idea of time and space is like, life is so busy, and there are plenty of afternoons where I don't catch myself. It's like they just got home from school. I work from home, so I'm in between meetings, and I quickly come in and I'm like, "Do you have any homework? We have to eat dinner." And it's like, give them a little room to breathe. Like they just got home. We're always rushing everywhere. We're always all feeling rushed, and just taking that beat to be like, whether you're frustrated, you have to remind yourself they mean well, or you just like need to take a beat and like give everybody a little time and a little space. Those are really, I think, really helpful reminders that can make a big difference over the next couple of years. I'm curious to open it up to the audience as well and see if there's any Q&A that folks have in the audience. If you do, you can put it, we won't be able to see it if you put it in the chat. So just click on the Q&A button. It should be towards the bottom right of your screen. And we will take any audience questions that there might be. Just give it a sec.
This quiet time reminds me, I have this junior in high school or senior in high school. So she's in a class college algebra, and she said that the teacher asks questions all the time. There's only 2 seniors and juniors and no one says anything. And she's like, I'm so bad at math, but I always just answer because I can't stand the silence and there's only 2 seniors. So I'll just be like, 86. And the teacher's like, good try. Let me show you how to do this. Like, but she won't start talking until someone answers. So I just throw random things out there. Oh, kids are funny.
Well, it looks like we don't have, I'm giving it another second, but I don't know if we have any audience questions. So I will just quickly share another resource that's coming up for just this topic of academic success and supporting your kids in school. It starts tomorrow night. We have a 3-part webinar series coming up. It's Dr. Jed Alperuth, our founder, and we'll be bringing in other speakers from our tutoring team, other folks that KP actually works with, like John Cadenhead, who's our director of tutor services. And it's 3 parts, just kind of understanding how learning works. Jed Alperuth, our founder, has a PhD in educational psychology. So he's going to kind of just talk about the brain science, like in a fun and engaging way about how that works. We kind of understand what's actually going on in our kids' heads. And then it's followed up by 2 really practical sessions on like study skills, and then actually putting those study skills to work to actually show what you know, whether it's on test day or the day, how to make it like put together a paper or presentation that comes together nicely. So if that's of interest, folks can register at alperuth.com/academic success. And it looks like that we did get a question here. So let me pull that up. Okay, so the question is, a 7th grader who is not great at reading emails and tracking homework. The parent has to keep reminding them again and again, but nothing works. And is there any they're just asking, are there any tricks that you can have to help try to get this 7th grader back on track to track their work? Any thoughts from either of you?
I think my first question would be, is there someone at the school that would be able to help, that you could partner with? Is there a teacher that you could have kind of on that side of the fence to help them make sure that the work is actually being written down? And then also, children love a good bribe. And, if you can put some exciting thing at the end of it, if we track this for a week and you get all your homework done for a week, middle schoolers definitely still love rewards too. That's always fun for them. But I think that you definitely need someone on the other side at school that'll be able to help.
Another thing that I might suggest is, for me, if it was my kid doing that, I would probably have them doing their work in a common area. Like at the kitchen table or something, or if there's like an office and you work at home and there's another place the kid can sit or something. I mean, I would be like, okay, for the next week, we're gonna have some like shared office space here, and we're just gonna kind of see, and this is not a punishment, this is me partnering with you. I just want to like help you. And then, have them get in the habit of like, after they come home, have a snack, then like 5 o'clock is like, check your email time. Because, a lot of times teachers I'll send like a little thing and be like, oh my gosh, number 3 on the answer key was wrong. Or by the way, I forgot to post the key to the review sheet, but it's posted now. Or, reminder, wear your pride shirt to school tomorrow, whatever reminders. So I don't know, maybe like having a set, like that's just part of his homework routine. Cause it seems like he or she, it didn't really say it was he. Oh yeah, it does say him. It sounds like he might have some like time management skills and some organizational skills needed. So I think just putting that organization and like a time in place, like, like Diana said, okay, when people come in the door, when your kids come in the door, maybe not right then, like maybe you get a half an hour to have a snack, be on social media, watch something on YouTube, whatever kids do. And then like, half an hour after, okay, meet me at the kitchen table. We're going to sit down, pull up your agenda. And for the first few days, you're just doing it with him. And then slowly you're like taking the scaffolding off. But I don't know. I just think like if my kid was doing that, I wouldn't be like, I don't know where the kid's doing their homework, but I wouldn't trust them to be just sitting in their room or something and be like, we're going to just chill in this common area for a little bit. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I would just add to both of your points. I'll say as a parent, I've experienced having the someone at school helping my child with just kind of writing things down that was suggested. Actually, I think Dr. Rivner and her team suggested it. And it was really great because it kind of, in a, I think, healthy way, took the parents out of the equation a little bit. Like there was somebody teaching that skill. It wasn't us nagging. And I think it also like took a lot of stress. Like it helped me see that the main thing that was stressing out my kid was not getting the work done, but keeping track of it. And then like how much easier it was for him to step into getting the work done when somebody had helped him with the like writing it down, knowing where to remember it. And then the other thing that we've been saying in our house, because everybody has a tendency to say like, yeah, I don't have any homework, is to say it's always your homework to actually go look at your assignment book or your, like, that's always your homework. Even if it's like, you're going to go and you're going to see that it's exactly like you said, it's nothing. And so we try to like have that rule. Obviously, look, doesn't like everybody follows it perfectly, but it does kind of change the perspective on like, okay, it's an important task to actually look and just double check. That's been helpful in our house too.
Well, and also I find that middle schoolers actually some high schoolers too, they think that like the only thing that needs to be done are the items that are due the next day. And if we could all get out of our minds that like, my niece recently failed a science test. She's in 5th grade. I bought her a computer before we moved so she could Zoom me. And I was like, people pay me a lot of money to do this and you get me for free. So she asked me to help her study, but it was the day before a test. And it was just too much. It was on like all kinds of electricity and hydroelectric power and electrons and neutrons and the atoms. And it was too much. And had she asked me on like Monday, but she's in 5th grade. So she didn't think about studying a little bit each day. She just knew she had a test tomorrow. She needed help. So I think what I do with executive functioning, I did this with a 9th grader who I've had since 6th grade. But when he hit 9th grade, it was too much. And we had to like look at his honors biology and be like, okay, there's a test this day. And we had to write down what he was going to do each day. Even though it wasn't assigned, it's like, you need to read these parts in the textbook. So I think that Dr. Rivner was talking about that, like chunking material at some point and like studying a little bit at a time. So even when you think you don't have homework, you also might.
Well, this has been incredibly helpful. I feel like this is on my mind all the time, and I still have learned a few new things that I have noted down that I want to like take back with me to the time and space. That's a good one for me. It's always good to know which advice is good for you as a parent. But really, I just want to thank both of you. This is a very busy time of year for educators. So thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedules during the back to school season when things are crazier than ever. to share some of your wisdom with parents, help us all get the year started off right. Because this is the time of year where we all want to do it right. We all have our best intentions, and we have, as my other colleague here at Apple Ruth and I joke about, we all start the year with color coded folders, and then it goes, downhill from there. So thank you for being here for that moment for us. And also thanks to the folks in the audience who took the time, because we parents are also really busy right now. And I hope you found the information helpful. We'd love to see you back at other webinars in the future. And if you do have any, I will put just in the chat a link to, if you have any questions about our programs, whether it's our executive function coaching or our academic tutoring, that's a link. You can schedule an appointment to talk to an Apple Ruth advisor, just chat about your kid, what you're seeing, and they're very versed in everything that we spoke about tonight and can help you, figure out if you do need support outside of school, what might be the right fit for you and how we can be of help. But I do want to thank you all for being here and look forward to hopefully seeing everyone in another webinar soon. Thank you again, Dr. Rivner and KP.